Hey everyone, and welcome back for another installment in our new figure showcase series, and I am really excited about this one. Size of the shipping box alone was the first sign of what I was in for. And in case you didn't know, I finally got Carnage in hand from Hot Toys based on his appearance in the Venom sequel. And I should also add that this was one of the quicker releases. We just saw the blogger images drop 2 weeks ago on Facebook, and I already have him in hand. So as a US based collector, it's nice to get him so quickly. Now, I am always candid with you guys, and the first thing to note overall is that I thought the movie was just okay. I think if I had to pick between Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage, the first one is definitely much better. Second one was okay, but not what I was expecting for a Carnage movie. I think I was a little surprised by the humor in the movie. Not that that's a bad thing, but I think I've always seen Venom and Carnage as more horror level villains, especially Carnage / Cletus Cassidy. And I think as we started seeing some of the domestic issues between Eddie and Venom in the movie and the over-the-top nature of Cletus, I was a little bit disappointed. I was very much hoping for a much darker movie, but that was my own fault. Even so, I was entertained, but the movie did feel like some of the older comic films we've seen in the past, and it's not something that I'm necessarily rushing to rewatch. Now, what I can't deny is how awesome Carnage looked in live action. I love Carnage. In the comics, Venom and Carnage are some of my favorite Spider-Man villains, so to get to see him on screen was a treat. And the Carnage scenes and the mayhem he delivered did not disappoint at all. The only thing I did question was the size. In the movie, he was huge, towering over Venom. And as you'll no doubt see with the figure as we review, he really is massive. And just to reiterate, when the box got delivered, I was surprised to see the dimensions. Although when you see the figure and everything included, it's justified. So be prepared for that when you get him in hand. Also, he did come in two versions, the deluxe, which included the transforming Eddie sculpt, and the Venom bust so you could display the sculpt, and then the standard, which just included Carnage. I went with the standard for myself. While I thought the alternate Venom sculpt looked amazing, it was a $65 difference. So I just didn't feel like it was justified for me. And honestly, I don't know that I would ever display my Venom with the transforming sculpt. And I also don't know that I would display the bust either. A bust just doesn't fit into what I was trying to do with my setup here. But it's available if you are interested. So let's start with the basics and look at the overall package we're getting here. And first of all, the figure, again, I can't tell you how insanely huge he is in person. So that alone I think stands out. But just look at everything that's included here. When you unbox this, it's piece after piece that you just keep removing from the packaging. And laid out, you finally get a sense of everything that's included. So he does come with an alternate Carnage open mouth sculpt, a variety of tongue attachments for that sculpt, swappable hands with all sorts of different looks, courtesy of the symbiote's ability to make weapons, big sword arms and blades, and a series of tendrils that connect to his back, as well as a ton of different tendril attachments that are all unique. So again, just feels like stylistically you can get a lot out of this guy. And of course he comes with a bigger base, appropriate enough for a figure the size, which we've seen before with Thanos and the Venom release. I think you'll start to get a sense as we go through the review how impressed I really am with this figure. And before we get started, I did stand him next to another figure in my collection. I know I should have grabbed Spidey, but I just went with the closest one at hand to show you the scale next to a more standard 6 scale 12-inch figure. And you can see how much larger Carnage is. I do still have to unbox my Venom, so when I do that, I'll probably get a Spider-Man as well, so I can show a few poses with all three together. But for now, let's just take a closer look at the accessories. And we'll start with the 3 alternate hands, and they're all amazing. First of all, the paint apps here, just astounding. I think one of the most unsettling things about Carnage, and it's been translated to the figure, is that the red almost seems like exposed flesh and blood. So it's much more gruesome than the Venom. And the hands definitely carry that motif, looking really nasty. Not just because the paint apps are there, but also because of the bladed hands that just look like they can do some serious damage. My favorite though is the center hand with the 3 extended claws. Just looks super menacing and dangerous. And they aren't smooth pieces. Every claw and every element of the hand has some ridges, almost lobster-like, and the paint apps just reflect the light, making it feel really oozy. They just look like something not to trifle with, so I love that. Next up, you get these 4 tendrils that connect to the figure's back. And again, they're huge. They're almost as tall as the figure itself, so it should continue to give you a sense of the scale of the package. And just like with the hands, they're gruesome looking with the blood red color scheme, the bumps, the black vein details wrapping around these. It just looks alive, if that makes sense. These are all bendy elements, so I think getting them posed to look good will be a bit of a challenge, but I think with patience, sky's the limit on these. And there's a great variety with a single tendril, 2 doubles, and a triple. And they have clear plastic pegs to slide into the body and clear pegs at the tips, so you can accept the variety of tips that are included. Speaking of those tendril tips, let's look at those next. And I split them into 2 groups. The first are more bladed type versions that almost look like they're more suitable for slicing. And as you look at them, again, the first impressive point is that no piece is identical. I think it could have been easy to just reuse and give us some duplicates under the assumption no one is really going to notice, but this feels like they went the extra step. And I love the uniqueness. Again, very organic looking. And if I had to describe what it reminds me of, it's almost like lobster or crab claws with all the ridges. Paint on all of these is awesome with that reflective red, but even then it's not just one shade of red, it changes, so it's a great bit of attention to detail, and they aren't just solid elements too. If you look closely, there are indentations and small openings along the surface, so more great detail work there. The next set of tendril tips are more pointy in nature, so I would say more of a stabbing element as opposed to slicing, and again, all very unique with the same great color apps. And just, I think the sense I keep getting is they look disgusting. Like, they really look nasty. I know it's the red symbiote, but it almost looks bloody, which again is why I always envisioned Carnage as more of a horror-style villain. But these pieces are great. My personal favorite is the last piece on the upper left-hand side that's almost a pointed blade with tendrils wrapping around, creating this kind of spiral configuration. For some reason, it just resonates with me, looking dangerous, but also having an almost insane beauty to it. Now, final symbiote arm accessories are massive, and they're forearm attachments. And again, if you look back at the first shot with all the accessories laid out, you can see how massive they are. So the first is just a long, almost blade-like element that carries on that paint and color scheme from the smaller tip accessories. And it has this ridge-like structure, but it's just massive. The more impressive piece, though, for me is this giant blade piece. First of all, size alone makes it stand out, but then the level of detail here, starting with the joint, where you have these strands of flesh connecting the blade, it almost feels like muscles, and you can see those same kind of holes throughout that just make it look organic and just, again, disgustingly alive. When you see it in person, that's the piece that immediately captures your attention, or at least that was the case for me. Next set of accessories are the different tongues for the open mouth sculpt, and we'll look at the sculpt shortly, but just like with Venom, you're getting some tongues to add, and they connect to the sculpt via magnet, so kudos to Hot Toys for that. But these look incredible as well. I think you're starting to see the theme here. Everything is great, and they just look real, almost wet and slimy, and obviously the different lengths allow for great unique looks. They're just really well done pieces, and I can't say more than that. It's just really impressive work here. And finally, you get the stand. Although by itself, the figure doesn't completely need it, but with the accessories on, that's a different story. But I do like the nameplate is a red metallic piece with Carnage written in a sloppy way. And then the top of the stand is a nice image as well. Nothing earth-shattering here, but a nice stand, and with some of the elements here, it's not something I'm immediately shifting to storage. Now let's get into the figure itself and start with the first sculpt, which is the closed mouth one. First thing I'll mention, there's no peg for the sculpt. These are connected to the neck purely via magnets. And you know what? It actually works extremely well. And it's one less thing to worry about since you're not manhandling the figure to swap sculpts or pull off the face. But looking at the piece itself, this is just gruesomely beautiful. I love the color variation, first of all, with the hints of black around the eyes and the jaws, but the eyes are just stunning. There's a glass-like reflectiveness to them, and you can see some hints of vein work along the edges where the skin is starting to connect into the eye slots. Then looking at the jaw, besides the teeth, I love how at the corners of the mouth, the skin looks ready to split with just little sinewy elements holding the jaw in place. It looks very skeletal and mummy-like. And then the teeth look amazing. It's not just a single painted piece. These look like individual pieces, all varying and just looking nasty and yellow. It's impressive and just incredible looking. Second sculpt is the open mouth one, and it's just as impressive, and also a little bit bigger than the first sculpt. Now the eyes and the paint apps are similarly amazing, but what really stands out here are the teeth. I love what Hot Toys achieved here. And the lower jaw with the double row just looks so dangerous. On the side of the sculpt, I also love the stretched out muscles and sinew, giving you that nasty symbiote look. The great thing about the sculpt too, you can use it by itself without the tongues and still have the figure look amazing. Once you add the tongues, you can definitely give it an extra dynamic feel. So the options you have with this guy are just endless apparently, or there's at least a lot of them. And as someone who likes to dabble with posing, that's a huge plus for me. Now, let's jump into the rest of the figure, and I'll start by saying that the arms and legs are a harder plastic, while the body is a softer, almost rubbery-like material. Now, I know some collectors don't like exposed joints. With the swappable lower arm pieces, I think you needed them, and they do blend in well with the rest of the figure. I think a lot of it benefits from the color schemes. Now, Carnage's abdomen looks insane. Again, because of that red color, it looks like muscle and veins exposed, almost like he's been skinned. The chest skin has those muscle striations, and the black symbiote elements that propagate throughout just look nasty and are beautifully recreated. I also like that the arms and legs all include little tendrils sticking out of the body. As opposed to Venom, Carnage feels more like he's constantly moving and maybe less in control, which again makes perfect sense given the character's story. Now the feet look a little on the small side, but so far I've been able to have him stand really well, and the joints on these feel strong. So we'll just have to see how these hold up. But every piece on this figure just looks great. Honestly, there's so much going on with the body and the elements and the tendrils, it's almost a little overwhelming to try to make sense of what's going on and what you're looking at. But there's a beauty there to what we're getting that I just can't really express to you unless you're holding this guy in hand. Now on his back, you can see that he does include some small circles where you would remove the hard plastic elements to allow you to peg in the large tendrils. I am surprised that you only have 3 when they gave you 4 tendrils, but again, that's just there to help with the variety of looks and just gives you options, which is great. So, overall thoughts looking at this figure. What can I say other than it's incredible? I've said this before. Sometimes you buy figures because you love the property they're based on. And that bit of, call it nostalgia, can make an okay figure just feel like an overall better release. Now, a bad movie with a bad figure tends to be something you just push aside. And sometimes the negatives kind of get aggravated a little bit or escalated. But a great figure based on a poor property still stands out. And here, even though Let There Be Carnage wasn't great, I feel like the figure we got is just amazing. And fortunately, he'll fit into a Marvel collection with the rest of the Spidey villains. I do love that we're getting Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, and honestly, I'm hoping that this is the kind of reaction I have to the Morbius release as well. But looking at this figure, I love what you can do here. And if you do have limited space, I still feel like he looks great in a more standard museum pose. However, if you are able to spare some room in your display, the figure looks so good in a dynamic pose. Tendrils just give you so many options. They peg in easily to the back, and I think the key is just having a little patience, like I mentioned earlier, to get them posed in a way you like. There really is so much flexibility here. On top of that, the massive lower arm pieces just make a figure that already stands out look even more imposing. Now, if you have Venom, you could pose both in a struggle, but then I think that by itself would need a ton of space. Not sure I'll be able to do that, but it'll be a great option. But still, I'm going to aim for posing this figure in the display because I think it just stands out beyond that just standard museum pose. The red by itself just immediately catches your eye, and with all these pieces attached, even more so. Honestly, looking at this figure, I don't know how Spidey could survive against him. I know Carnage is dead in the Sonyverse of movies, but I would have loved to see Tom Holland's Spidey take on Venom and Carnage. Based on the end credit scenes from No Way Home, symbiote is definitely still in play, so hopefully that'll become a reality at some point in the future, because I think that would be something really worth watching. While I don't have much faith in the Sonyverse, I am looking forward to some of their movies, more for the hope of continuing to add these figures to the Spidey display. So, now a few things to watch out for. Swapping the arms out requires a little force, but nothing too crazy. And the hands are also pretty straightforward swaps. The other surprising thing to me is if you take your time like I've done, even with the tendrils or those massive arm pieces, the figure can actually stand on its own without needing a stand. So it's well balanced, although that is the other slight issue here. While the lower half of the figure has some nice articulation, unless you use the stand, I'm not sure you're going to get him into super dynamic poses below the abdomen. The other thing to watch out for, the shoulder joints. While Hot Toys did a great job with the blending of the joints, as you're posing you might have the shoulder slip down a little, revealing a gap and the unpainted plastic in the shoulder joint. So just be mindful and pop the shoulder back up to conceal it. But besides that, I think the joints are well concealed and do give you a lot of flexibility. So that was a quick look at Carnage from the Venom sequel. This was a figure that I didn't have on my radar as a potential top figure of the year, but after having him in hand, looking at how impressive he actually is, and actually being able to play with him and kind of pose him, he's definitely in the running to make that list. I know sometimes we can be hard on Hot Toys, especially with some of the decisions they've been making recently, or even the DeLorean issue I had, but man, there's definitely a reason why they continue to impress, and at least for now, continue to be top in the 6 scale game. So yeah, I love this figure, and this is easily one of the best pickups of the year so far. So as always, thank you for watching with me, and if you are enjoying the content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll touch base on the next video.